You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, presented in late July 2021. Today, we'll talk about the pinball machine and various video games of the past for Doctor Who with our special guest, Ken VanMersbergen. We'll protect those game boxes from retro protection in our collection protection segment, and a 1975 John Pertwee annual that will exceed your jawline for the most outrageous offer. All coming up next. And now, singing our theme song, Fraser Hines.
They all say, who is Doctor Who? Where is he from? What does he do? They wonder who is Doctor Who? So I ask you, who's Doctor Who?
Welcome back to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, the podcast that explores the sometimes old tech world of Doctor Who collecting, those who collect, issues surrounding Doctor Who collecting, and of course all kinds of Doctor Who merchandise. I'm proud to be here today. I am Larry VanMersbergen, your host, and I've been collecting Doctor Who since 1981. I had the honor and distinction of opening one of the first Doctor Who stores in Chicago in 1984 called Bundles from Britain. And we were dealers at TARDIS 22 in November of 1985. We are mentioned in a wonderful book that every collector should have on their shelf, and it's called Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America. Bundles from Britain lives on page 384, and you can find a link to purchase this book on the front page of our website at drwhocollectors.com. We do not make any money on that book. We just want every collector to have a copy. Speaking of links, of course, I want to give to you a couple of great links that all collectors should be using. First of all is timelash.com, the TARDIS book library, to keep track of your books, your vinyl CD collection for free. Special thanks to Mr. Dan O'Malley, who keeps up that site and doesn't charge a fee. If you don't know what you have, or you're looking for something that might be outside that spec, then you can look it up at one of the greatest resources for Doctor Who merchandise, Howe's Transcendental Toy Box, and that's at drwhotoybox.co.uk. Of course, David J. Howe is a good friend of mine and a great resource for collectors. Of course, if you are looking for great Doctor Who items at great prices, look no further than DoctorWhoStore.com, which is Alien Entertainment, and they have everything you need. If you're in Chicago, they're in the heart of downtown Lombard. You can visit our website, of course, at DoctorWhoCollectors.com and see a lot of the offerings from our sponsor at Forbidden Planet. Your purchases help keep this podcast on the air. Don't forget to sign up now for Chicago TARDIS 2021, returning to an in-person convention this Thanksgiving weekend. Guests include Colin Baker, our sixth Doctor, Simon Fisher Becker, the great Doria Maldivar, Sadie Miller, the daughter of Elizabeth Sladen, who's reincarnating the character of Sarah Jane Smith for Big Finish, and of course just announced the wonderful Fraser Hines. More to be announced, so keep ChicagoTARDIS.com in your bookmarks and experience the best Doctor Who convention in the Midwest. I'm honored by them to be their collecting expert, so be sure to stop by and see the Doctor Who collecting presentation in person. Or you can see it from last year when we did the virtual convention, and you can find that on the Chicago TARDIS YouTube and Facebook page streams. We also have it on our playlist on YouTube if you just search Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Our theme song, of course, is Who's Doctor Who, composed by Barry Mason and Les Reed, performed by Fraser Hines. Consider supporting our podcast, and you can do that in one of two ways. You can find us at Podbean, which is drwhocollectors.podbean.com, a great collection of podcasts, and you can click the subscribe button, and for any amount you choose, you can help keep our expenses down. You can also, of course, hear this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including now Stitcher Radio and Pandora. we are a proud member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance, so you can hear a lot of great Doctor Who podcasts at drwhopodcastalliance.org. Also, you can check out our eBay store for some rare offerings. Every once in a while, we get duplicates into the collection here or promo items that we don't necessarily want to hold on to, and all the proceeds from that store do benefit the podcast. A couple more podcasts I want to call your attention to. The first is, of course, Police Box in a Junkyard podcast, where a random Doctor Who story is discussed, and I've been a guest on a few episodes. It's been a lot of fun to do. They actually pick a random either story or book or comic book or audio adventure, and so you never know what's going to come up next. And it's hosted by our good friend Eric Branson. You'll find it on SoundCloud as part of the Video Junkyard podcast family. Another podcast I highly recommend that you listen to is the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, hosted by my good friend Tony Witt, along with Alison Fitch-Seyfried and Dalton Hughes. I am proud to announce that our next episode, we will be doing a joint podcast broadcast on a very special Doctor Who item with the Target Book Club podcast. We are going to review a book in the Target Book podcast format, and then switch over to the collector's side of things with the same group of people putting together this presentation. It's going to be basically the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast and the Doctor Who Collector's podcast, and it'll run on both of our platforms. So this will be the first time that this has been done that I'm aware of anyway, and we're going to be talking about a fan fiction favorite. This story came about in the early 80s, and I remember it being talked about quite well, and it's called The Doctor and the Enterprise, which was written by the late Jean Airey. It's one of the first stories to cross both universes. It features the Fourth Doctor with the classic Star Trek crew, with Kirk, Spock, Bones, Scotty, Chekhov, Sulu, Uhura, and it's going to be more fun than an Andoran Yo-Yo contest, I guarantee it. We will also be helping to celebrate their 100th episode, and it's an honor and a privilege to be part of that celebration. It's not easy to reach 100 episodes in the podcast world, but the Doctor Who Target Book Club has reviewed 100 Target books, or technically Target books. Some of these are we're off, some were Target books, some were off Target. So anyway, join us for that. You'll join me, Tony Witt, Alison Fitch-Seyfried, and Dalton Hughes for this event. After the break, today we're going to talk about the Doctor Who Pinball machine, the Minds of Terror video game for the Commodore 64, and Dalek Attack for the Amiga, and Destiny of the Doctors for Windows 98. My special guest is, of course, a video game expert and my brother, Ken VanMersbergen, will be talking about that. He owns the pinball machine. We also have collection protection, the most outrageous offer, and a bonus audio clip. Stay tuned.
I would like to invite you to take a trip across all of time and space.
Join us in the police box as we discuss the worlds of Doctor Who in a completely random order.
We discuss it all. TV stories, audio adventures, novels, nonfiction books, and on and on. I'm your host, Eric Branson. I would be very happy if you join me for the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast.
The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a proud partner of the Video Junkyard podcast and can be found on most major podcast platforms including SoundCloud, Podcast Addict, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and Spotify.
You are listening to
the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Witt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitch-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Enjoy your travels.
Up there is the scanner, those are the doors, that is a chair with a panda on it. Sheer poetry, dear boy.
You can go ahead.
I want to activate the second console. I take safety measures.
And now it's time for the main story. Today we're going to talk about Doctor Who arcade games and Doctor Who classic video games. And so what you're hearing is the Doctor Who Pinball machine that was made by Bally, released in September of 1992. And currently the Time Destructor is open. And my guest today is someone very close to me, someone I introduced to Doctor Who many years ago, and that's my brother Ken. Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Of course, I've introduced you. You're my younger brother. You've
Yep.
been watching Doctor Who basically since you were a kid.
Yep.
Do you remember exactly when that was?
I don't know the year, but I know the Doctor in the story. It was Tom Baker, of course, and the story was Revenge of the Cybermen, and I remember it
yes.
distinctly because it had the Howard De Silva introductions to it.
Yes, which was common in the WTTW Chicago productions. In fact, those Howard De Silva introductions are now very difficult to find with the prints. But anyway, the reason we're gathered, our main story today, of course, is about the Doctor Who Pinball and classic video games. So I told my listeners I don't own the pinball, but it's in the family. So tell me about, now according to the information I have, that really it was released in September of 1992.
That's correct.
And 7,752 models were released.
Yes, that's confirmed.
So tell me a little bit about the history of the pinball machine.
Well, the pinball machine started when Bill Futzenreuter, who is a programmer at Williams, he programmed a lot of the pinball machines at that time. He was given an opportunity to design his own pinball game. They figured it was time for him to do so, and he asked what theme should he do. He was like, well, do a theme that you're into, that you know all the aspects of, that makes it easier to design a game. So we chose Doctor Who. He was a huge Doctor Who fan, probably still is. And his first vision of the game was he wanted all the companions, all the doctors, because the most fun, he said, was in the multi-doctor stories, so his game will have all the doctors in there, all 7 of them at the time, and all their as many companions as he could possibly fit in. So he set out to design the game, and he broke out an old drafting table, because the CAD computers they used at the time were expensive, and they couldn't get him one.
Okay.
He was already a programmer, and he was already approaching his budget for that system he was used there. And he designed it, and they built a Whitewood. A Whitewood is a prototype of a pinball machine.
Okay.
Basically, it allows them to play the game before it becomes production to see if the shots work. Is it fun? Is there things that need to change? Well, he couldn't hit any of the shots, and the game was not fun. So,
Okay.
dejected, he went to Roger Sharp's office. You probably guys know of Roger Sharp, very, very important in pinball history.
Okay.
He basically dumped all his problems on Roger's desk, so to speak, and Roger gave him a pep talk, talking about his early design days and how he was discouraged, but he carried on. And he said, Barry Owsler's not working on anything right now. Why don't you go down to his office and see if he'll co-design the game with you? So he did, and Barry agreed, and he basically got rid of all of Bill's devices, created all new ones, and made a game that actually played well and had good shots and was fun to play. You can see a lot of Barry's design in the design of the game itself, with the time expander, the 15 control panel lights in front of it, is reminiscent of Pinbot. If you're familiar with that pinball,
Yes.
there's also
Yes.
a lighted control panel in front of their device, so that's Barry Owsler there. So the game was produced
initially there was an inside joke. It was actually at the bottom of the stairs of the building. The prototype was so people could play it. And the doctor's at the bottom of the stairs. And that's the kind of joke that they would say about that. They weren't sure how well it would sell, though, as Doctor Who at the time. Even then, it was still a bit of a niche type of topic of subject.
In '92, Doctor Who merchandising was actually in a nosedive because the series had been canceled in 1989, and we're still 4 years away from any hope of a return,
Right.
and even a decade away from the actual return. So I would imagine that this was probably looked at in America as far as why are we putting out a Doctor Who pinball machine when there's no market for it?
Well, also the license was cheap.
Oh,
When
okay,
he looked into
that makes
Doctor
sense.
Who, they called up the BBC, and it was actually quite cheap to get a Doctor Who license at that time. So that's why he went forward with the project.
Okay.
And so initially he wanted to have all the doctors have speech in the game, all the companions have a phrase or two in the game. But when they added all that up, because they had to get, they have to contract the actors, they have to book studio time.
Right.
The John Hay, the sound engineer, had to travel over there. That was all put in the budget for obtaining these sound samples. And it was just too much money for that ambitious. It was too ambitious. So he was told, you got to whittle it down. So he whittled it down to basically the three characters he was having in the game. The Master, which at the time was his main villain in the game. The Anthony Ainley Master was his target for that. The Doctor, he said the seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, because he was the current one at the time. And the Daleks. He wanted a voice to do the Daleks, because they were also an enemy in the game.
Okay.
So he wrote the script for what he needed the actors to say. And also later, Sylvester McCoy added some of his own phrases on his own.
Okay.
So that's why some of his trademark phrases are also in the game. Futz didn't write those. He stuck them in there, and they liked them, so they put them in.
So was Dalek in the corner pocket?
Yes, that was Sylvester's ad-lib line. That was Sylvester's ad-lib line.
That sounds
it's
like
a good
his
one.
wet.
They left
Yeah.
it in.
Okay.
On purpose. But he had like 5 or 6 pages of master speech because he was the main villain. He had to explain the plot. He had to explain all these things. And Doctor, there's no way you can win. Ha ha ha, and things like that.
Right.
So John Hay bundles up his sound recorder, goes to England to record the actors. And he did record the speech, but he called up Bill and said, yeah, Anthony didn't record any master speech, and he did not explain why. So it was kind of obvious. But he said, there's a gentleman here who's doing the Dalek voices. He says he could also do a Davros voice. His name is Terry Malloy.
Oh.
So Terry Malloy did the Dalek voices, and now he's doing the Davros voice. So Bill said, oh, that's awesome. So he quickly cobbled together some speech, 3 pages this time, budget.
Right.
Because he had to change the script. It can't be the Master anymore. And the Master in the game was changed to the Roger Delgado-looking Master, and just a track laugh, ha 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 ha, was put in, just him, just that. He doesn't talk at all in any other way. But he is featured prominently on the playfield.
Yes. In fact, while we're on that subject, describe the playfield for our listeners, since the listeners won't have a visual. But as we're looking down from the flippers, what do we see in the artwork?
There's a playfield's layout. You do have the Master and the Daleks at the bottom by the flippers. They're quite large. On the left here, by the hang-on score, we have Patrick Troughton along with Jamie and Zoe. Second Doctor is there with the TARDIS console. And off on the right, near the escape targets, is the First Doctor and Susan.
Okay, yes.
And right kitty corner to him is John Pertwee's Doctor, along with Liz Shaw, the Brigadier, and Sergeant Benton.
Okay.
In Bessie. And to the left of him is Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor and Perry on the mountainous planet where looks like the Daleks are there as well, right there in the background. They're hiding there. And up to his left are the repair targets, where you find the Fourth Doctor and Leela.
Okay.
Basically, that he's repairing his TARDIS from old force field generators, unreliable force field generators. And you have to ask, where's the Fifth Doctor? Well, he's back in the back right-hand corner. He's there with Tegan, Nyssa, and Adric.
Okay.
And he's in the midst of a bunch of transmat spheres. His Doctor helps you with the transmat.
Okay.
And the time expander takes up the back of the playfield, and the Master is there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like he's about to push a button.
Okay. We also, I just noticing here, we also have the Who-mobile.
Yep, the mobile's on there as well.
And the TARDIS.
Yep, the TARDIS is here. That's how the ball enters the playfield through the TARDIS. You might have heard that sound effect.
Yes.
The game is played. That's when the ball enters the playfield. Anytime the ball enters the playfield from that area, it comes through the TARDIS.
Which,
was
you know,
cool.
and just going back to the license, obviously all of those sounds, the TARDIS dematerialization, the theme song, are all heavily licensed.
Yes.
Another curious thing, too, and I don't know if you have any insight to this, is the chosen to use the classic Doctor Who logo versus the neon logo, which would have been prominent in 1992. Why did they go with the diamond logo?
Probably because he felt it was more prominent, more well known in the States, because Tom Baker started it, and Pertwee too as well. Tom Baker was, well, it was the Doctor to me as a kid, and probably a lot of people who be playing this pinball would know that as well. So the diamond logo, I think, is just more. It's a classic look. It's, you know what it is instantly. The neon might be a little hard to read, maybe on a pinball machine. Plus, you can't light it up as well as it does. There was a bit of a light effect on the logo on the back glass when it's on.
Okay, and just to talk to our listeners for a moment, that the first 100 of these games included a Dalek topper. Your machine has the Dalek topper, but it's not one of the first 100 machines. And then later they actually came out with what they called a wobblehead kit to upgrade your machine to a moving Dalek, and that is also not what you have in your machine.
That's not what I have
So
here.
you rigged it up yourself. So
Yes.
tell our listeners how you rigged up your Dalek. And by the way, we have a little video of the Dalek moving it'll be on our YouTube page and our website. But go ahead and tell us about that.
It's true. The first 100 units had a moving Dalek head. Then the bean counters attacked.
I bet it was very expensive to do.
Too much, Bill. You got to cut it down. He defended a lot of the features on this machine, but the moving Dalek head, they said that wasn't really necessary, and it was right. So all Doctor Who pinballs have a Dalek up there. They just don't move.
Okay.
The flasher bulb is still in there, and when the Daleks talk, it flashes. But what I did, I found out that the actual Williams still had to support the first 100 machines that had the moving head if there was a problem. So they still stocked the motor.
Okay.
So at this time, this would be 1999, about year 2000, I found that they still had the motor in stock.
Oh, wow.
So I ordered one. I figured, what the heck? I'll order one. See if they'll give it to me. And they did. I'm like, wow, okay, now I have the motor. Now what? So I had to do some research and find out how the motor was actually hooked up. What
Okay.
circuits control it. And I had a friend of mine at the time, Urban Cruz, who I worked with when I worked at the time. He was a bit of an electronics whiz, more than I was at the time. And he helped me construct this. And I stole an opto sensor from the upper right flipper because it doesn't exist on this game. And that's the opto switch. There is a ring with a tab up there that tells the head when the head is in the center position. And that's when it stops.
Okay.
It goes left and right, and then it will stop. Now, the actual Wobble Kit has a slowdown motor. Mine does not have a slowdown motor, so my Dalek panics more because he moves a lot faster. But I like that
wow.
better.
Okay, so more of a custom.
It's definitely
Dalek
a
job.
custom job. The motor got its drive. We found that where it got it from old documentation, and we found at Williams. They had it, and very nicely they gave us copies of it.
Okay.
And at that time, they were very open to requests. It was a reasonable request. Sometimes they have to pay, but they didn't this time. They just gave us the information.
I can also understand, too, that when you move the machine and have to place it in, that breaking that Dalek head would be a high consideration and probably something they considered.
Yep. Although it's its own dome, and it's held down with security screws, because they don't want people getting in there.
Okay.
And when you move the machine, you unhook it and you fold the back glass down.
So the security screws to keep people from stealing the Dalek.
Yep. Although there are some machines I've seen on some locations that did not have the Dalek anymore, because it was most likely removed due to
Space considerations.
Because
Yeah.
most pinballs at the time, they don't have anything up there. But in the early 90s, that was Williams' greatest era of pinball. The Addams Family came out. That was a huge pinball success for them. And Doctor Who was after that. And they just had everybody's putting toppers on their pinball machines for some reason.
Okay, and
Just
just as far as moving goes, does the top fold down
Yes,
over
it
the
does.
machine? Okay, that's great. And it's just to kind of now to talk about the fact, one of the things we talk about on the podcast is the cost of collectibles. This is a very unique collectible.
Yes, it is.
The David Howe's Transcendental Toy Box does list the pinball machine, and from 2003, which is a long time ago, they list the possible price in working mint condition at about $4,000. We're now in 2021. I assume there are fewer of these machines that are actually fully working. I know the parts are available all over the place. There are items that you can buy, including the Seven Doctors in kind of almost a Christmas ornament type of fashion,
Yep.
and other things. So in your opinion, as an expert in pinball and, of course, the Doctor Who pinball, what would one expect to pay for a completely working machine today?
Probably if it's fully working, fully repaired, and there's no problems with it, there's no damage to the artwork of the sides, or the Dalek is still there, even if it moves or not, I'd say it's more around $8,000 these days.
$8,000. We've researched offers out there, and that is about what I call a reasonable offer for the pinball machine, and especially in full working condition. Also, it takes up a little bit of space, and not easy to move up and down stairs, I imagine.
Not at all.
So that's something to consider as well. So if you were going to give advice to somebody who was shopping for a Doctor Who pinball machine, what advice would you give them?
Basically, make sure you have the room for it. Make sure you have the ability to transport it. You got a friend with a truck, that's a good plus. And have a couple of strong bodies to help you carry it. Having a cart is paramount.
Any advice and tips about once you get it, how to maintain it?
Well, pinballs do require a lot of maintenance and care. A lot of times you're replacing light bulbs because they do burn out. However, there are some LED upgrade kits using LED lights, which last longer. I debated getting one for Doctor Who. They're not that expensive. They're around like $150 to $200, depending on the vendor you get it from. And every vendor's got lights that are a little brighter, a little dimmer, a little different. So the best place to go is like the Pinball Expo, which is coming up in October. They're actually having it this year.
That's in Chicago, the Chicago
Schaumburg,
area.
actually.
Schaumburg
It's gonna be in
area.
Schaumburg this year. It's a new location for them.
We'll post the information about the Pinball Expo on our page.
There usually is a Doctor Who pinball there, and it's usually been decked out with LEDs and some other things. A color DM dot matrix display they have now for this game. I try to keep mine as they were from the factory. That's my thing. I like that.
So it's almost an original machine,
Right?
Except for the upgrades.
Yeah, the upgrade to the Dalek head because I thought that was cool, and I thought we should restore it. The accountants took it away, but we're going to put it back.
Sounds good. Okay, that was the Doctor Who pinball machine. We're going to move on to classic Doctor Who video games. So now we're going to talk about classic Doctor Who video games, and for that we're going to have to go back to the mid-'80s and the Commodore 64. So, Ken, tell us about this game that we're going to take a look at.
Well, this one's called Doctor Who in the Mines of Terror. It originally came out in 1985 for the BBC microcomputer. Then later it was ported to the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad CPC in 1986. Of course, the version we have here, of course, is the Commodore 64 version.
Okay.
Doesn't do a bad job on the theme. The Commodore 64 SID chip.
Okay, and let's talk about gameplay and what exactly is going on with the game.
Yeah, we'll start that up here. It's got to load in.
Okay. Remember, old computers take a little time to load, everybody. The TARDIS just...
Yep, the TARDIS materialized, and now the Colin Baker Doctor is there with Splinks, which is his little cat, programmable cat.
Okay.
And the Doctor moves around. The objective of the game is to stop the production of heatonite. Apparently the Master has a Tiru,
Okay.
which I forgot what that stands for, but it's a weapon that the Doctor was sent here by the Time Lords to stop him. He's got to stop the production of heatonite.
Okay.
I thought it was simple as just taking the pickaxe away from people down here, but it's not that simple.
I will say, even with the early graphics, that the Colin Baker Doctor is actually very easy to distinguish.
See,
We're going to show you some video on our YouTube page. I love the public domain soundtrack too, by the way.
Oh, like the Bad News Bears. The animation's actually quite good. Aha! Now I have the pickaxe. There it is. I just beat the game. They can't mine the heatonite, can they? But no, it's not that simple. Even if he's standing there doing nothing, he still produces a heatonite, which I thought was dumb at the time.
So the Doctor has to stop the heatonite and prevent... Does the Master appear in the game?
No, I don't think he appears in the game.
Okay.
But he is there, and the robot guardians here, as you'll see, they look suspiciously like Daleks.
Okay.
But they're not called Daleks because they can't be called Daleks.
Right, the Terry Nation estate did not grant permission.
Right, well, they pursued it, but it was too expensive. This game was already... See, there they
Oh
are.
yeah, they do look like Daleks.
Yeah. Now, this game, actually, Micropower, it cost them so much money to develop this game that they went out of business shortly after its release.
Oh, wow.
And it was only released in England, so it's kind of hard to find here in the U.S. Matter of fact, I don't think any U.S. software houses picked it up.
Okay.
So the only reason we played it, oh, see, there's that guy there. Where he's putting the heat knife into here. Where'd he get it from? I have his pickaxe. I don't know. So one of my goals to beat this game at one point, because when I played it years ago, I had no idea what the object of the game was.
Right.
Because you have to have the manual with the documentation, because it actually explains a lot on how the game is played and how to use Splinks. Splinks is programmable. He can go places where you can't, and all the guards and people ignore him.
Okay.
So you can send him into an area that you can't get into, for example.
Well, listeners, if you have this game and have a manual, contact us at DoctorWhoCollectorsPodcast@gmail.com. And so that's the Doctor Who and the Mines of Terror. We're going to actually look at another game on a system called the Amiga, which is called Dalek Attack. So now we're kind of listening to the opening of a game called Dalek Attack, which is on the Amiga system. And you can see the video of this, which actually looks pretty good, featuring the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. So when did this game come out?
You know, in the early 90s. Think about 92, 93. Only in England again. It was not brought out here to the U.S.
Okay. Again, using the classic Doctor Who logo versus the, what would be the 89 logo.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that. In this case, I'm not sure why they did something like that. But the game is basically an arcade shooter.
Okay.
If you're familiar with those?
Yes.
It can support up to 2 players. One is the Doctor.
A little bit of Genesis of the Daleks there.
When the time is right, we will give and take our rightful place as the supreme of the universe.
Yes, the Amiga was capable of much better sound than the Commodore 64.
So what year was the Amiga released?
Amiga came out in 1987. 1985, the first Amigas came out.
Okay.
You can tell the music is way improved.
Oh, yeah.
And the graphics were made by alternative software.
Okay. Do you know what the price of the game was back in the day?
I think it was about $40.
$40, okay.
1992, yep.
92, okay.
That's
So
our
again, like
software.
the same year the pinball came out.
Yep. But they were developed as totally alien to one another.
Right.
Right.
So it's interesting that they produced all these games
Hall of Fame.
when Doctor Who was off the air. Yeah.
2254 to planet Skaro.
Davros, in the presence of the Emperor Dalek, addresses his battle command. Okay.
Invasion begins. Doctor must destroy the pods and reverse the beam before Davros turns the Earth into a Dalek production planet.
Oh, wow.
Give you some options. Select player's character. I always play as the Doctor. Play some music or sound effects. Music or and sound effects.
Okay.
I don't know. Sound effects might be good. And you start in the sewer level.
Okay, of course. You got to start at the bottom.
The Doctor's kind of on a floating platform where he's shooting different things. If he takes too long, Daleks appear behind him. You can't turn around and shoot them, though, which is really stupid, in my opinion.
Okay.
Poor game design. Taking damage from that.
Definitely interesting that the it's basically like a standard shoot-up type of game. How many lives does the Doctor get?
Looks like he gets... doesn't show. Only one, I think.
One,
You can see how much
okay.
damage. When you take damage, your face turns into a... Oh,
Yeah, so we've lost it.
you only
So-
have one life.
Okay. So anyway, just kind of recap on these classic video games. Were there more produced, or were these just pretty much the par for the course?
It was this particular game also came out for the Commodore 64 and the IBM PC. DOS came out there as well as the Commodore Amiga. Only in England. So I'm not sure if it sold very well at all. I know the previous thing we looked at, that did not sell very well at all because it was not a very good game.
Okay.
And as I said, the company went out of business shortly after producing it, so there was very little marketing.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's so hard to find.
Okay.
Whereas Dalek Attack was more well known, almost a staple of Amiga gaming. Had good graphics, and good sound, and the gameplay. It's basically an arcade shooter.
Okay. Okay, and lastly, I want to talk just briefly about the game Destiny of the Doctors, which came out for the Windows 98 machine.
Yep.
So tell us what you know about that. I know that, for one thing, it's the final appearance of Anthony Ainley as the Master, as he died shortly after. But tell us about the game.
Well, the game was created, once again, in England, not created here. I found out about it, I believe, through Doctor Who magazine. They said it was coming out, so at that time, you did have limited internet at that time to find things, and I was able to import a couple copies of the game. I gave one to a friend of mine, and I kept the other one. I played the game because I was waiting for a decent Doctor Who game for quite some time to come out, and it wasn't that bad. It does have custom speech from all the surviving doctors. So interesting is John Pertwee was scheduled to do a recording session, but he died suddenly.
Right.
And they were not able to do that. So his voices are sampled from his existing episodes.
Right.
So his dialogue is limited in the game.
Yes.
Whereas starting from Tom Baker, he gives you intricate instructions and talks directly to you. And it's pretty interesting with that. And of course, Anthony Ainley is the Master. He does a very good job in this game. He is the primary villain. Has a lot of full motion video footage of him. And I believe the video footage is on the DVD Survival release. I believe Survival has all of his scenes on that DVD. If you're interested in just his scenes,
you can also find a lot of those scenes on YouTube. They've made their way to there, and we'll include some of those in our broadcast as well. But the one thing too, since Destiny of the Doctors, there was a long period of silence. In the world of Doctor Who games, there wasn't anything that really came out in the video era. But not to even go there, but I know not too long ago they did release some adventure games featuring the 11th Doctor. Do you know anything about those?
No, I've had no experience with those. Although I do know there was a games that came out for the Wii.
Also, yes, there was
for
a
the
Wii.
Nintendo DS had a version, had a game, and there was recently there was a VR game for PlayStation VR and the Oculus that was released. I figure it does feature the current Doctor.
Okay. And any advice out there to people looking to find these classic video games? Any places you can direct them to other than the obvious?
Well, the obvious place is eBay. I don't recommend eBay in most cases, but in a lot of cases, it's the only place you can find these. I know there is a copy of Minds of Terror on there right now, going for about $150 Australian. It's a cassette version, though. It was released on cassette and disc. Disc is the more desirable one for people who collect. There was one on there a couple of years ago. I think it went for $300.
Wow.
Remember, these were only released in England, and no software house in the U.S. imported and released it here, so there's no American copies.
And of course, we're talking several decades after they were released, and not very many were made.
Right.
So these do count. One of the words I hate using is the word rare because it's overused in collecting, but I would call these actually rare things to find.
In this case, they are rare. One, because as I said, the company went out of business shortly after they released it. It cost them too much money. So there wasn't a whole lot of marketing, and people who bought it, a lot of reviewers did not like the game, and then that influenced some people whether or not they bought it and whether or not they kept it. Some people might have put it in the rubbish tip. So, if you find a boxed copy, it's actually quite nice. The Minds of Terror actually is a nice case that it comes in, very presentable. It goes right on the bookshelf, looks really nice. Dalek Attack was in more of a regular type of box, which also had very good artwork on it. But once again, only released in England. But that one might be easier to find. More copies of that were made.
Okay.
So it was very popular within circles. The Amiga Net one, people imported it, but not not the legal way. It ended up in America. I mean, my first experience with Minds of Terror was similar, but we didn't understand anything about the game. It was very difficult to play it because you need the manual in most cases. But they are hard to find. I said they're hard to find.
Okay.
But if you persist, you could find them out there. But you will have to import it in most cases from either Australia or the UK.
Well, that basically concludes our story on the pinball and classic games. I want to thank my guest, Ken VanMersbergen. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Oh, no problem. I enjoyed it.
Sad, really, isn't it?
People spend all their time making nice things, and other people come along and break them.
And now it's time for collection protection. And today, since our theme is video games, I thought I'd do a little research into video game protection. Normally, we talk about our wonderful friends at Bags Unlimited, but today we're going to talk about another company, and you can find them at retroprotection.com. High quality cases for display and defense. And they offer a lot of different protection products for, let's say, your Funko Pops, Nintendo, Sega, Atari, PC games, audio cassette adventures, and also including Hot Wheels, G.I. Joe action figures, and Legos, trading cards, but they also deal with VHS and things like that, Star Wars and television. You can take a look at a lot of their different, including whole consoles. They have boxes that'll hold your Nintendo and your Sega and your Wii and things of that nature. So that they are a pretty intense company here that has a lot of those different things. So if you're looking for something that protects those particular items, then we highly recommend retroprotection.com. Let's see, I don't think they have a phone number. They do not. So everything is online. So that's the best place you can go to find protection for those boxes. They might actually have box protectors that might serve other items as well. A lot of times I'm looking for something to hold the Dennis Fisher action figures, and sometimes I'll find a box for something else that actually will fit that pretty well. So a lot of times we're looking at experimenting and trying to figure out what will do the best. But they come highly recommended and they're highly well reviewed. So I am saying again, this is called Retro Protection at retroprotection.com for all your video game related and other protection agencies. Of course, if you're looking for bags for your books, I still stick by Bags Unlimited Incorporated at bagsunlimited.com. Thank you. This has been Collection Protection.
All my travellings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
And now it's time for the most outrageous offer. We do get lots of emails providing, what they think to be outrageous offers. Some of them may be just a little high priced, but, ultimately, as much as we don't agree with the practice, the market may drive a certain item to a certain price point that is higher than where we think it should be, but that's not up to us, where there's no governing body on that. But today, we have an outrageous offer that is clearly over the mark. So we're going to talk about that here. So we have here the Doctor Who Annual 1975, which was the final annual for John Pertwee as the Doctor. It's a wonderful book. I have a copy in my collection. And we have a bookseller here called, let's see here, Low Key Books in Sumas, Washington. They have been selling books since 2018. And they have a copy of the book here in good condition, some moderate creases or wear. Might be an ex-library copy. And so they're saying it's pretty much not that great. Anyway, the price they're asking for this is $1,749.99. Which I thought, to me, that's outrageous. That's crazy, because I also did an alternative search for this book, and I found that you can buy them in the same condition for $16. So the exact same book, same condition, readable copy, fair, maybe some highlighting, maybe the cover's bent. If you're just looking for a reading copy, you can pay less than 10%. Less than 1%, I should say, of the cost of what they were asking for. So $1,749 for a slightly banged up copy of the Annual 75. I'm going to say no on that one. That is definitely an outrageous offer. If you have seen an offer that is truly outrageous, and like I said, I've seen a few come through, send them to us here at Doctor Who Collectors Podcast at gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Doctor Who Collectors. Thank you so much. This has been an outrageous offer. Well, thank you for listening today to our podcast. We're going to end our podcast with a little bonus audio clip from Destiny of the Doctors, the Master's intro, and the audio sequence from When You Win the Game. So I hope you enjoyed today's broadcast. Stay tuned. Our next episode will be a joint podcast with the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast. We're celebrating their 100th anniversary, and we'll be talking about the late Jean Airey's novel, The Doctor and the Enterprise, a novel that was never meant to be published. Oh, and more stories about that, including the sequel. So we'll see you then next time. You'll hear that podcast on both platforms. It'll be released as the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast and the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. So this is Larry VanMersbergen, your host, saying, keep collecting.
Mighty orb, planet of pure mental energy. I, the Master, have harnessed the majesty of your psychic intellect and made you my puppet. Through you I shall fulfill my destiny to bend the universe unto my will. To begin, I summon the 7 complete incarnations of the one known as the Doctor, a Time Lord who more than any other has sought to frustrate my destiny. The Doctor's 7 past incarnations shall be summoned hither, where they shall be my prisoners, to be dealt with as I see fit. I shall encapsulate the Doctor's psyche within the depths of the determinant, the domain I have created through your conquered will, and I shall systematically eradicate all past and any futures of the one who has sought to undermine my supremacy. Oh, mighty Silas. Verem Ue Evanal. Bring forth the Doctor. The most recent. One so busy setting plans and traps that he fails to see those set for him. Oh, look, the blustering one in the stupid coat. How he struts and gloats. Wait, there's the nice one, such charm, such innocence, such naivety, such a fool. The bohemian, the wanderer, one so keen to abandon his roots that he abandoned his sense. Now, there was a worthy foe, such cunning, such ingenuity, all wasted through that stubborn streak of goodness, the comedian, but a capable comedian too. Not quite the clown he looks, this one. And there's the first. Such wisdom, such intellect. But oh, what a bore the fellow was. What? A hero, a challenger? Someone to defend your miserable existence, Doctor? Something you've cobbled up yourself by the look of it? Well, good luck, Grok. You'll definitely need it. The destiny of the Doctors is in your hands. Don't make me laugh. Clark, Doctor, thank goodness you turned up. Hasn't it been fun? Actually, I quite enjoyed our intellectual exchanges at the Great Divide. Stimulating. Well, let's crack on now and start sorting out this whole universe, eh? We'll have to hurry. These monsters, they've taken it all the wrong way, as you can see. Our sense of humor completely lost on them. They think that I was actually serious about that dominating the universe business.
Hurry now. We can join forces. But quickly, summon Cyrilos and release me from my captivity, Doctor.
Brock, I implore you, it's time for a truce. Let's make a pact. They have me, but it was only a game, an intellectual challenge. I played fair. I never tampered with the rules. For old time's sake, release me, Doctor. You know what these monsters will do to me.
Release me.
Release me!